Zawadi City's old township felt like a place holding its breath. Dust floated in the late afternoon light, and the auction room smelled of paper, sweat, and old wood. Amara sat in the back with a plain scarf and a steady face. Her grandmother's compound was lot 14. The auctioneer spoke fast. A few men lifted their paddles. Amara lifted hers once, then again, her heart beating in her throat. She kept thinking of Granny Nandi's mango trees and the cracked blue door that once stuck in the rains. The price climbed, then stalled. Amara gave one last bid and the hammer fell. Silence inside her broke into a quiet storm. Outside, the city noise rushed in. Her parents had believed the auction was about paper sorting. They did not understand what was at stake. She met the lawyer in a narrow office above a shop that sold radios. The floor creaked. He read the deed, line by line, while a fan clicked above them. Amara wired her life savings without shaking. Every coin she saved from late shifts, every small raise, gone in one clean transfer. "You will not speak of this," she said, eye to eye. He nodded and stamped the papers. She placed the title in a trust with her name hidden, like a seed under soil. Walking home, she traced the route past the mango grove, the gate, the wall with the faded mural. The compound would be safe now. She felt fear and relief hold hands inside her. Sunday came hot and bright, and Makan smelled of stew and smoke and rain on dust. The family squeezed around Mama Lindai's long table. Pots clicked, spoons scraped, cousins argued over chairs. Amara slipped in with a small hello and took the end seat near the window where the breeze could find her. She served herself a little ugali and a little beef stew and a lot of water. She was tired from the week and wanted a quiet meal. But quiet never lives long in this house. Mama Lindai's laugh rose first, full and proud, and the room snapped to her like metal to a magnet. "Our home is already promised," she said, smiling at Chipo, who beamed back like a new coin. "Chipo will bring her husband and the children, even his mother can stay. It is right. Amara will marry and forget." The table burst into easy laughter. Someone banged a cup. Someone clapped. Chipo's husband, Toriro, raised his brows as if to say, "Of course." Amara lifted her glass and drank. The water was cold and clear. She let it wash the heat in her chest. She did not argue. She did not blink. She watched steam curl from the stew and counted her own breath. 1, 2, 3. "You know, Amara," an aunt added, ladling more sauce. "Her head is for books and offices, not houses. Let the house have children running." More laughter. A cousin whispered a joke about wedding bells. The old radio in the corner crackled and died. A fly walked the rim of Amara's plate. She moved it away and kept her face calm. She thought of mango tree one that bends low near the gate, and of Granny Nandi's small hands peeling fruit for them after school. She thought of papers with seals and stamps sleeping safely where no one at this table could touch them. She thought of promises that are only air. She chewed slowly, swallowed, and set her fork down. "Eat, Amara," Mama Lindai called down the table, voice sweet now. "Do not sit like a guest." Amara smiled once, soft and closed. "I am eating," she said, and the words were gentle and light as cloth. She kept her eyes on her plate and let the noise pass over her like a wave. Inside, she folded her anger small and tied it with a string. She would not waste it here. She would keep it for the day it would matter. At sunrise the street outside the compound woke to the sound of a small truck and men in blue overalls. Amara stood by the old gate with a clipboard and a calm face. The foreman, a careful man with a pencil behind his ear, nodded to her and waved his team forward. They carried new iron panels, boxes of screws, coils of cable, and 2 small cameras that blinked like patient eyes. "Repairs ordered by the council," the foreman said to anyone who asked, his voice smooth and bored, as if this was the most ordinary job in the world. The old gate came off its hinges with a long groan. Dust rose like smoke. Amara watched every bolt and wrote down every step. Inside the yard, she opened the storeroom and began to catalog everything. 3 carved stools. 1 radio with a cracked dial. 6 aluminum cooking pots. Granny Nandi's sewing machine wrapped in a faded scarf. She wrote it all in neat lines and took pictures with her phone. The electrician fixed new lights by the path and ran cable to the corners of the roof. Camera here. Camera there, he said, drilling neat holes. The new gate stood taller and heavier than the last one and closed with a clean click that sounded like a full stop. By mid-morning the noise drew neighbors to their doors. Murmurs ran along the fence. Then Toriro arrived with long strides and restless hands. He looked at the truck, at the men, at the new keypad where the old latch used to be. "Who told you to do this?" he demanded, stepping in front of the foreman. "This is family property. Stop now." The foreman did not step back. He reached into his folder and pulled out a paper with an official seal. "Municipal permit for essential repairs," he said, showing the signature at the bottom. The name of the trust sat in bold black letters. Toriro's mouth worked like a fish that forgot how to breathe. "A trust," he said, trying to laugh. "What trust?" Amara sipped her tea and looked at him with tired eyes. "Please move away from the gate," she said softly. "The weld is still warm." He tried to call someone, but the phone signal faltered and the foreman had already turned away to mark the wall for a fresh coat of paint. Workers carried out broken hinges and bent nails and carried in bags of cement that thumped like heartbeats. By afternoon, the cameras were online, a small red light steady on each one. The keypad glowed under the shadow of the mango tree. Amara finished her list and locked the inventory in her folder. "Thank you," she told the crew, and they wiped their hands and nodded. The compound felt different now, like a chest that had learned to breathe again. Outside, Toriro paced the road and watched the new gate shine in the sun. Inside, Amara stood in the cool shade and felt the ground hold her up. Kalimba's council hall sat on a little rise above the river, a square room with a tin roof that rang like a drum when wind blew over it. The elders gathered in neat chairs that had 1 short leg each, so they rocked when someone shifted. A kettle hissed on a charcoal stove near the door. Amara walked in quietly with a plain folder and a small bottle of water. Baba Kinna stood at the center with his walking stick planted like a flag. He cleared his throat. "We are here to remind a child to respect promises," he said, and the old men nodded as if heads were seeds and nodding was rain. Aunties lined the back wall, soft scarves tied low. Mama Lindai sat straight as a spear. Baba Kinna spoke of family peace and the old way where words carried weight. He spoke of Chipo and children who needed space to sleep. He spoke of doors that must open. Amara listened, hands folded on her lap. The room smelled of chalk, tea, and dust. When they finished, she stood and set the folder on the wooden table. She did not raise her voice. She pulled out the deed that carried a stamp as blue as a new bruise, the receipt for the purchase, and the bank slip that showed the transfer had cleared. She laid down the statement from the registrar that said all liens were settled and no debts clung to the house. She placed the last paper on top, the heritage clause that named Granny Nandi's mango grove as protected land inside the compound, not to be cut, not to be sold, not to be paved for parking. She paused so the page could breathe. The elders leaned in and murmured. Someone adjusted his glasses. Someone else whispered the word trust like it was a pebble he had not seen before. Amara's father rubbed his forehead. Her mother's fingers worried the edge of her wrap. "I respect promises," Amara said, steady and clear. "I respect written ones most, because they keep peace when memories fight." She turned the deed so the elders could read. Baba Kinna rocked in his chair and looked at the seals. He asked where the money came from. She said from years of work and saving and a small loan already repaid. He asked if the council had been tricked. She said no and pointed to dates and signatures older than last week's stew. A bird called from the roof. The kettle clicked off. And the mangoes, an elder asked, tapping the claws with a small smile. They stay, Amara said, and for the first time that day a bit of warmth rose in her chest. Her parents traded looks that flashed fear and pride in the same breath. Outside, the river moved as if it had all the time in the world. Inside, a new line had been drawn, not in sand, but in ink. The morning the clan came, the street smelled like dust and diesel and something sweet from a thermos of coffee. A truck rolled up slow and loud, packed tight with mattresses, a crate of pots, a couple of goats bleeding in the heat, and a bright neon, "Welcome Home" banner that shivered in the sun like a fever. Children ran ahead, chasing each other and trailing ribbons. Aunties carried pillows and plastic basins. Men laughed and argued about where the sofa would sit. They pushed the banner toward the gate like a coronation. But the gate did not open. A new keypad sat where the old latch used to be, small and black with a red light blinking like a warning. For a moment the laughter stalled and the goats forgot to bleat. Chiriro shoved against the bars and called, "Open up." "What is this?" His voice went hard with commands. Chipo stood behind him, trying to smile, but her hands were white on the strap of her bag. A dozen relatives crowded close, faces hot, eyes bright, and the banner drooping like a question. Amara walked out from the compound in rough workwear, jeans dusty at the knees, a shirt with cement on the sleeve. She had on boots and a cap and she wore calm-like armor. A slim man in a suit stood beside her holding a clipboard. That was the property manager. He had a municipal badge tucked in his pocket and the same kind of tired patience as the foreman. Amara did not shout. She stood with her hands loose at her sides and looked at the people she had grown up with. "Please don't force me to call the marshal," she said, and her voice was small but flat, the kind that left no room for argument. Chiriro laughed a short, ugly laugh and took a step forward. A child clutched the banner and peered through the bars, eyes wide. Someone from the truck started to sing a little song to hide the tension. The property manager stepped up and showed his papers without flourish. People leaned over each other to see. The paper looked official even from a distance. A neighbor on the corner held his hand to his mouth. "We came with everything," an aunt cried, and her voice hit like a stone. Amara nodded, and something soft moved in her face, grief, maybe, or memory, but she did not move aside. The marshal did not yet appear, but a car idled 2 streets away. Someone had called. The morning air felt heavy, as if the whole neighborhood waited for a single breath to fall. In that pause, the banner sagged more and more people looked not at the gate but at Amara. She met Chipo's eyes for a single second, and there was no triumph in that look, only the steady quiet of a woman who had chosen the hard thing and was ready to stand by it. The courtyard filled up like a small storm. First came the neighbor who sold mangoes, then the old teacher from down the road, then children who thought it was play and stayed for the show. Amara had the property manager stand near the gate while she set a small speaker on the low wall and tapped her phone. A voice came out, clear and ordinary, her mother speaking in the kitchen voice people used when they thought no one listened. "We promised Chipo the house," it said, the words rolling like spilled tea. Another note followed with her father bargaining about how the wedding would settle everything, and a third where they laughed about Amara marrying and forgetting. People shifted. Faces went from curiosity to surprise to a slow, sharp kind of understanding. Amara did not shout, she let the recording speak while she crouched and opened a battered folder. One by one she laid out paper after paper on a cloth she had spread on the stone. Stamped receipts for roof repairs she paid for when rain broke through, receipts for land tax paid in full, clinic bills where she had signed for Granny Nandi's treatment, grocery lists she had saved that showed months she had covered the family food while others had not. There were also bank statements with transfers in her name, and a signed invoice from the electrician who put in the cameras. The neighbors leaned in, a woman who kept the community book of births and deaths touched the bank slip and made a small noise that sounded like a verdict. Someone murmured, "She paid for all this?" The laughter that had risen at Mama Lindai's Sunday table dried up like paint. People who had once nodded at promises now scanned the papers and shook their heads in the slow way of people watching a story change. Chipo stood near the truck, her hand on the banner that now hung limp. Her face went a little white and then hard. Chihiro tried to speak, but his words fell into the space between receipts and the voice notes and did not land. A child asked why the marshal might come and an ant covered the child's mouth as if to stop the question from making trouble. Amara folded a receipt with careful fingers and placed it beside the voice notes. "I paid when the roof leaked," she said quietly, not to accuse but to explain. "I paid the taxes. I paid for Granny's medicine. I have kept this house." The crowd listened like people listening for rain. As the sun moved and threw long shadows across the mango grove, the old story about the house being promised began to look thin and strange. What had been said in secret was now in the open, counted and named. The neighbors who had once gossiped now stood sober, and a hush settled over the courtyard as if the compound itself had learned to breathe again. A thin man in a dark suit arrived just after lunch, carrying a slim envelope that said Nuru High Court in bold letters, and when he stepped into the courtyard everything seemed to pause, like someone had stopped the day to listen. He handed the envelope to the property manager and then read the paper aloud because the words were heavy and the crowd needed them spelled out. "By order of the court," he said, "the trust is valid. The title is secure. Unauthorized occupancy is trespass. Any attempted transfer based on a promise is void." The sentence landed like a stone. People shuffled. Some breathed out hard. Chihiro's face went red and then flushed pale with a quick kind of anger that makes a man loud but not clever. He started to speak fast, to bluster about family rights and tradition, and to call the court name unfair and fancy, but the messenger folded his hands and waited, and no one else joined Chihiro's noise. The marshal's car was there on the next street, a small dark shape with a soft hum, and a young uniformed officer stood by it with his cap in one hand and his face polite but ready. Chipo's children stood close together under the banner that now sagged against the truck, their eyes were wide and lost, like little boats without oars. They did not know the meaning of injunctions or trusts, they only knew that the place they had expected to sleep in tonight might not be theirs. The neighbors watched from porches and doorways, some whispering, some with arms folded, and the ones who had earlier cheered for promises looked down at their feet. Amara stood by the mango tree with her folder under her arm and did not shout or celebrate. Her hands were steady. She felt the legal paper in the manager's hand and the weight of the crowd, and she let both remind her why she had saved and waited. The property manager explained in clear, small words what the court meant. The trust had been lawfully formed, the deed recorded, and anyone who stayed without permission risked being removed and charged. "Promises spoken at a dinner do not change a registered title," he said, and the elders shifted in their seats as if memory itself might be questioned. Baba Kinna, who had led the meeting in Kalimba, folded his walking stick and looked down, the noise of his objections already spent. Chihiro paced and cursed under his breath and tried to rally support, but people who had come with banners and goats now whispered to each other and stepped back. The marshal's presence made the moment official. It meant a quiet that stopped shouting and forces decisions. Chipo hugged her children and held on, the sudden weight of reality pressing like a hand on her shoulder. The court paper did not feel like mercy to the family who had hoped for a home, it felt like the end of a long argument finally given a true voice. In that hush, the compound seemed to breathe differently, as if a locked door had been closed and the house itself agreed to be kept safe. As the sun slid down and the mango leaves turned from green to shadow, Amara walked to the center of the yard with a small stack of papers and a steady voice. She did not shout or gloat, she spoke quietly so everyone could hear the truth without noise. "I will not throw anyone out," she said, and the words made a kind of room for them all. She offered a simple, written agreement. Her parents could stay in the front flat, pay 1 shilling a year as rent, and keep their things, no keys handed to others, no more secret promises, no selling or giving parts of the compound away without everyone signing. It was not mean. It was fair and legal, and it asked only for respect and clear rules. She explained that a home needs boundaries to keep love from turning into hurt. Mama Lindai's face softened, and Baba Kina looked at the paper as if it were a small map back to calm. Chipo listened with her arms folded, and Toriro's shoulders eased a little. The marshal stood nearby but did not need to step forward, the paper held what words alone had failed to hold. Amara told them she would look after Granny Nandi's mangoes and the old sewing machine, that she would fix the roof when it leaked, and that she wanted the house to keep the sounds of children in cooking and music. In return, she asked for honesty, for no more whispered bargains, and for the family to follow the tenancy if they wished to stay. People murmured, some pleased, some unsure, but the anger that had heated the morning cooled like a pot with its lid on. Lights came on across the compound, soft and steady, and neighbors saw a woman who could both protect and forgive. Later, someone walked home repeating a line that stuck, inherit promises if you like, but titles inherit you. It sounded new and true, and the mango branches above them nodded as if they agreed.